All right, Christy Giannoni back for my last multimedia presentation for our History and Theory of Public Administration course. We are in week 7 and we are taking a look at 2 articles of our choosing in the Classics of Public Administration book. So for my first article, it's on page 559 for those who want to follow along. I took a look at The Policy Paradox, The Art of Political Decision Making by Deborah Stone, which was written in 1997. And there was a couple areas of interest to me that the book talked about in paradoxes in government itself. So losing is winning, policy goals and political goals, which came first, the problem or solution. And this quote really stuck out to me as I was doing the reading. We really win if we win, but we may also win if we lose, by Senator Bob Dole. If that's not a paradox, I don't know what is. So it talks about the idea of policy goals versus political goals, which reminded me of the article that we read last week from Kingdon of how does an idea's time come? And so which comes first, the problem or the solution? Was there something that somebody wanted to implement and so they found, problems to create to get to that solution, or was their idea a solution itself? The idea that political agendas are always on the forefront, that even if something doesn't get passed, if legislation doesn't happen, that the political party or the person can utilize that further down the line to make something happen. I was able to find 2 articles of interest. The first article talks about policy influence factors, basically things that would influence the goals, either policy or political, before the paradox even starts. And the second article that I found was an example of the paradox at play, so talking about climate change. And so I think that's something that we have seen at the forefront of political discussion for years, and how it's brought about and how it's talked about in the different parties and how they have views on it. So it was kind of interesting to see it didn't cite the paradox or Deborah Stone directly, but it was a really good example of it at play. Next, I took a look at Toward a Feminist Perspective in Public Administration Theory by Kamala Stivers, and this was in 1989, and this is on page 470 in the book. So there is a variety of areas that I saw very interesting in this article. The title itself is what caught my eye because I think, like our professor talks about, there's still a lot to be studied by public administrators in public administration in different areas of it. And that's including the feminist perspective and just the lack of diversity in the early writings and formative years of public government. So she talks about women's varied experiences, so not just the female perspective, but those variances between race, socioeconomic disparities, class, culture that women can have. And the most interesting part of the article that I found was the restoring the public servant to a position of societal respect, and what that means. Because the model of the ideal public servant, which is the title, talks about heroism as masculine, and so it's a twofold goal that we're looking at, making the public servant reconceptualize in some manner so that there's more trust from the public, but then what that looks like and how do females fit into that. I found this article most intriguing because of how there can be an impact from the lack of varied perspective in general in the formative years of government. So not only in feminism and the lack of female influence in the early formative years of some of those documents that we read in the very beginning, but just the lack of diversity in general. And I think that's a very relevant and important topic that's taking place in current day. And so that's why I thought it was something that still continues to be revisited. And as I was looking at the journal articles, I had a hard time finding relevant journal articles on a feminist perspective in public administration theory, which was very telling to why we need this. And so I did find 2 articles of interest. And the first one is, talking about what we can gain from re-examining the past. And so how can we take a look at what may have been different, how we continue to grow from it. So I thought that was very interesting and relevant. And the second article, it talks about that the feminist review does not mean to regard men as the enemy. And I thought that was important to talk about when we're talking about different perspectives. It doesn't mean that it was wrong, that it was bad. It's just re-examining it and seeing what we can learn from it. So thank you for listening to all my multimedia presentations over the weeks. I wanted to end us with a quote on leadership and government and just why we're doing this program in general. And I thought that it was kind of telling to how we can tie this into Christianity itself. So appreciate everybody's feedback on my presentations over the week, and I look forward to hearing more on yours.